Hello, everybody, and welcome to our IT cybersecurity career panel. We are so excited for you to be joining us this evening. We are super excited to have so many individuals from a variety of companies within the industry spending time out of their very busy schedule, spending the evening with us to talk a little bit more about the industry, what it's like, and hopefully to share on some knowledge and some advice to share with our students and our audience members. So with that, I mean, we have typically till around 7 o'clock is when we like to wrap things up. And what we've found is that time flies with these career panels. So we'll go ahead and get started. Just some housekeeping rules, though, I should have shared. This is being recorded. So you know, you can leave your camera on or turn it off. That's okay. If you can please mute. We do have some general questions that we have for our panelists. However, this panel is really for our students and those participating. So if at any time you do have a question, towards the bottom of your screen is the chat section in Zoom. So you're more than welcome to go ahead and ask your question in the chat. And if you are a student here receiving extra credit for a course, feel free to, or at the end of the presentation, I will be dropping in a link for like a quick survey that you can take so we can get your name and what class you are getting extra credit for. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. And so for all of our panelists, if you could please introduce yourself and give us a little bit of background information about your position. Let's see,
well,
Alexis.
I was going to say, I guess not everybody go at once now. Hi, everybody. My name is Alexis Mayu. I've worked in IT and cybersecurity for just under 5 years now. I actually graduated from Australia Mountain Community College, so one of the community colleges in the local area. I got my degree in cybersecurity. I currently work with New Genesis Solutions as a cybersecurity analyst working in vulnerability management.
Yeah, I'll go next. Hi, my name is Collins Chibonga, and I am the information security engineer / security officer for Equality Health, downtown Phoenix. My background, I started off as a computer science major, and then I switched halfway to MIS. So if you guys are having doubts about your degree, I'm sure I can relate. But yeah, so that's about me. I'm basically a security officer dealing with policies, vulnerability scans, penetration, and basically overseeing the cybersecurity posture of the entire organization.
All right. Yeah, so I'll go next. My name is Marcus Theis, currently the security practice director at TB Consulting. Also, I'm a weekend warrior with the Arizona Air National Guard on the Cyber Joint Task Force at the Arizona Counterterrorism Information Center, which is basically the incident response arm for Arizona DHS. I've been working in cybersecurity for about 10 years, 20 years in IT. The first 10 years was as a network engineer, and then it was just a natural evolution to go from, engineering into security engineering. At TB Consulting, we're a managed service provider, so we do all sorts of security activities, monitoring, vulnerability management, security education, posture assessment for our clients.
Am I the last one? I'll go next if so. My name is Stacy Wallace. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for the Department of Revenue for the state of Arizona. I have right around 20 years of IT experience. Most of it is cyber. I got into cybersecurity before there was cybersecurity degrees, and quite by accident, when post 9/11, we saw an increase in the need for cybersecurity. So I've been around for a long time, and I've held positions as an analyst, a cybersecurity engineer, a software engineer, a security architect, and most recently, the CISO role. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're so excited to have you all here. So after that introduction, we will kind of start jumping in. And for those of you that are just joining us, you can go ahead and ask your questions. But you all have, different positions. So I'm kind of curious, how did you acquire your positions, or how did you get started in the industry, right? You all have some educational background, it sounds like. So how did you move from student into a professional? Like, what was that experience like? How did you land your position, or your first position in the industry?
Yeah, I think for myself, like I said, I had actually started as a network engineer. I was also active duty military in the beginning, so I was placed in a career field of IT. And there is kind of a high bar to entry when it comes to cybersecurity, right? Because it is a very umbrella term for all sorts of things, right? We have compliance, we have engineering, architecture, we have development, all, administration, analysis, governance. So it requires quite a wide range of background. So, I didn't get into cybersecurity until after 10 years in the field, but because of how prevalent cyber breaches are, out in the environment today, it was critical to move into that. And so what enabled me to move over to cybersecurity was going down the certification path first before I went down the education path. And so getting, the Security Plus, getting the CISSP and other, the CASP as well, was really helpful for me to like break into that career field.
Ms. Collins, for me, I think I've got a very similar background to Marco. You get out of college with your MIS degree that really has nothing to do with cybersecurity. It's more of a general, broad education. So you're getting the business side, and then you're getting the technical side. So when I got out of college, I was lucky to have a mentor, which I'll really emphasize on this core is for you guys to find good mentors that are in the field that you're in. And my decision was to go into IT, but what accelerated my career was my mentor right out of college told me, hey, go get these certifications. So yeah, I was getting out of college, with no real world experience, and I went after the certifications, which this might not be for you, but for me, I got out of college. My mentor told me to go get the certifications. So I got the network certifications. I got the Microsoft certifications because I was interested in that stuff at that time. And so that helps set a foundation. So even though, of course, it was the certification and the training at the same time. So when I started applying for positions out of college, people saw the certifications, which were helped me get my foot in the door somewhat. Even though I didn't have the experience to back me up, I had that training of getting a CCNP, a CCNA. I got a MCSE, but I had the foundation of having those certifications. So when people looked at my resume, they treated me a lot better than somebody who just came out of college with no background in IT. So obviously from there, after working for about 8 years in the industry, wearing different hats, being a systems guy, being a voice engineer, being a network engineer, being an exchange admin, having all that knowledge and my interest in cybersecurity kind of was just like the natural step after having that experience. But having that foundation, having a mentor, somebody who can speak and say, hey, take this route, avoid these, and take the shortcut to get to your destination much quicker. So that was my experience.
So unlike Marcos and Colin, I have quite a different experience actually, and I would say I'm the newest out of this panel into the industry. So similar in that I started out working in IT. I was actually working part-time while going to college, and I had a transition over into cybersecurity. Originally, I had this idea in my mind that I want to be a hacker because it sounds cool. And, you know, as you actually start to take those classes that are provided in our fantastic community colleges, you start to learn what the real picture is. It's not what's projected in the movies and the TV shows and things like that. And there's always a little bit of truth, but there's a lot of Hollywood to it. So as I started to progress, I learned to network. And this is something I've always emphasized both while in college and beyond, is to learn how to network with individuals, because that actually landed me the job that I currently have today, which I'll talk about here in a moment. But I started out actually getting an internship through one of the professors at my community college while taking a networking course. And that actually landed me an internship with a managed security service provider, working as a security analyst. So it's a great way for me, while still learning about the industry, while still gaining those skill sets, to also have a way to practically apply them in an actual environment, and to have somebody kind of teach me, this is how the real world works, and not just what you learn in the classroom. So I always recommend, if students have the time, go look for those paid internships. I know a lot of the community colleges offer partnership programs with different companies to be able to facilitate that. Through that process, I learned to network with other individuals. I actually got the job as well because there's another student there that then worked as their engineer who used to go to the same community college, and him and I used to have the same professor. So it's very much a continuous swing of, it's who you know, or it's somebody you know who knows someone. So I started attending what's called CSLUG. It's a cybersecurity and Linux users group. It's a group of students that get together and we talk about different cybersecurity, Linux, IT topics within the industry. We'll network and get to know each other. We'll sometimes have really great presentations, so on and so forth. But I met a gentleman named Andy Jordan. Now, mind you, this was 5 years ago. So speed up to about 5 years from now, Andy has now started his own company in vulnerability management space. And I had been looking for a job at the time because I was initially planning to relocate. Andy then presented me an employment offer, which I happily took. And because I had made that connection 5 years prior, I was then sitting across from somebody who would eventually become my future boss. So that's why I always emphasize networking. The space within cybersecurity in Arizona is so small, and you will always know somebody who knows someone. So, and to answer Marcus's question, CSLUG is a college group. I know Estrella has one. I don't know if the other community colleges do, but the C stands for cybersecurity, or the CS, I should say, and then the LUG is Linux Users Group. So it's kind of an acronym to encompass a pretty large space within IT and cybersecurity.
So gosh, I'm going to try to make this a short story, but over 20 years ago, and I'm going to be quite honest with you, I have a bachelor's degree from Auburn in economics. It has nothing to do with IT, but over 20 years ago, I had small children. I didn't want to work, but it was necessary to pay my mortgage. And I started working for the Department of Defense as a project administrator / project manager for some really cool technical things. And it made me realize that I needed some technical experience, because they had me doing things like anything from collecting data. Then I needed a database, and I needed to learn MATLAB, and we were recreating IED, analyzing data from black boxes that came off of Humvees. So I needed some technical experience, and I started getting some certifications and taking some classes at our community college just to get spun up with the people I worked with. And I just decided just to continue, and I did a master's degree in technology management because my skill set was actually, I did pick up technology. I was a database administrator, and then I really enjoyed looking at the data and trying to figure out what was happening. So they started, and again, I was very open to what the needs were of the organizations I worked for and what my customers' needs were. And they had a need for a security analyst. And I was not qualified, nor was I really interested in being an RF engineer or designing cell phone towers or designing tripping bombs and stuff like that. So I went with the need of the organization, which was a security analyst position. So that led me to my A+, and then my Security Plus certificate. In my spare time, I knocked out, it took me a while, but I knocked out a master's degree in technology only because I had an economics degree and not a technology background. So fast forward, again, I'm always looking for ways to meet the needs of my customer and my organization. And I was asked to take a position as a information assurance manager for the F-35 program. And I ran a lot of the compliance and a lot of incident responses for the West Coast, which was a lot of travel. So I just decided to take a state job to be a little more stable for my family. And I took a job as a security architect. One of my favorite positions in security, by the way. And I did that for a while. And my CISO, my boss, was promoted to be the state deputy CISO for Arizona. And then I was appointed to the CISO position. So most of my positions have been appointed positions in security, meaning I didn't go seek them. I was just seeking to bring value and fill the need of the organizations that I worked for.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. That's amazing. There's a few nuggets that I kind of listened to while you all were responding. And one of the things that you had mentioned, Alexis, was about reality versus what we think something is going to be, right? Like what we see on movies and TV. So I'm kind of curious, like, when you all entered cybersecurity, because a lot of people think like, oh, cybersecurity, what was like maybe something that you were surprised about or surprised to learn about the industry as you kind of got started or while you've been working in the industry?
For me, especially within cybersecurity, and this was kind of a scary fact in that we get this idea that everything is safe and that, you know, within cybersecurity, companies are always constantly keeping our data secure, in that attacks are a rare thing because we only ever hear about these big events that happen on the news. But in reality, when you kind of, pull back the screen and you see what that data actually looks like, it's way more common. You see the cybersecurity attacks happen more frequently. And mind you, there's a lot of companies that put in place great measures to block a lot of that, but it's still very prevalent. And it just shows that although cybersecurity is emerging, it is still very immature in its process, and it's still constantly growing. And kind of in that too, the neat factor of it too is the industry is growing, meaning there's more jobs. So.
Yeah, that's a great insight, Alexis. I think that, that's similar for me, right? Like, it's not the same as a physical attack where, say you were, getting bombarded constantly with gunshots at your door or something, but this is what's happening in cybersecurity. You're getting scanned. If you have a public IP, that's just the nature of the beast. You're going to be getting scanned. You're going to be getting hit constantly, and you're always going to be pushed into, as hard as you try, we're always one step behind, right? Because we have to be right all the time when the hackers only have to be, get it right once to get through. And another thing that I noticed that really got me with cybersecurity was that, it's very hard to be successful in the field if you don't have a passion and don't love it. Because to be able to stay up with all of the constant emerging threats and all of the change, you really have to do it more than just a job, right? Many of us, I would suspect here, and all of the folks that I've ran across in the industry, they love it. They have labs at home. They read about this on their off time. They learn new technologies just because they want to, right? And it's not just like a 9-to-5 job. And so, if you're looking at cybersecurity and you're thinking, okay, it's like Mr. Robot, and there's the whole, mysterious piece to it. It's not really that. It's a lot of staring at logs. It's a lot of research, right? There's a ton of research when it comes to investigations and understanding how things work and really getting into the weeds. And so that was the one that really surprised me when I made the move, was that it's always there and you have to have a passion for it.
I'd like to add to what Marcus is saying, because you do have to have passion, because what was surprising for me is how boring some of it can be. And yes, it's exciting, and yes, it's this, you have this sexy side of cybersecurity. I think Alexis talked about the hacking. You know, you've got this sexy side of security, but the majority of it is hygiene. If you're not doing the basic, boring, day in and day out stuff of cybersecurity, you're not going to be successful. And there's really two things. There's that, the boring side of cybersecurity that surprised me. And that's, I think, where the passion comes in, because that gets you through. But then if you don't have director level support, if you don't have top support, that's another area that surprised me. I have watched many security leaders and analysts, and pretty much all throughout the ranks, fail without having top level support. So those were my two big takeaways that surprised me.
Yeah, for me, I think one of the things is, and I think you guys, once you get out there, you realize that security in an organization is a shared responsibility. So yeah, you could be the security officer of the organization, but guess what? In order for everything to function, you have to deal with the developers, the programmers, the network guys, the systems guys. So keeping all these guys in check, you quickly become unpopular, because here's what you're doing. I'm reminding people, hey, your server is vulnerable. You need to patch it ASAP. I'm talking to the network guy, hey, your firewall is running an OS version that's like 3 behind. So you're keeping everybody in check. So you have to be tactful in the way you deal with people, because you quickly become disliked because of your responsibilities, which is to ensure the security posture of the organization. So one of the things that I discovered, working in cybersecurity, because I'd worked as a network engineer, I'd worked as a systems engineer, an Exchange admin, a VoIP admin. So, but this particular role is very interdependent on the other departments. So what you're doing is you're overseeing, potentially, depending on your organization, you're seeing the app development, making sure that the code that's being put out there by the developers, has gone through software composition analysis, which means, hey, if you're using a module produced by an individual somewhere in London, and it's a freeware, which means, they're just doing it based on their own time, and you introduce that component into your organization, and your organization has an app that's, receiving or transmitting PII or PHI. So here you have to have, you gotta be like on top of everybody. So making sure, hey, you guys are doing your patches. Are we doing our penetration tests regularly? Are we doing our vulnerability scans regularly? The systems guys, are you patching, the latest Windows, Linux? Network guys, same thing. So it's a lot of hold handing, because sometimes these individuals in these positions do not want to act on some of these vulnerabilities, and they might take them lightly. So you're constantly either in their face, talking to their manager, or something like that. So shared responsibility, and then wearing the hat of the auditor who raises the red flag and says, hey, there's something going on here. We need to immediately take care of it. And sometimes you face resistance. And to Stacy's point, the other thing is, I think organizations are becoming more recipient to having a security guy have a seat at the table, which means a security guy can go into an exec's meeting and say, hey, this is what we have, this is the infrastructure we have, and to boost up the infrastructure and to ensure the security of the organization, I need 300,000 K. And if you have an executive or executives that don't appreciate the importance of cybersecurity, then you'll be doing a lot of patchwork where, okay, I could have the latest and greatest, but I can't do that because my executives don't see the importance of, I'm not saying this happens in my organization, FYI, because this is being recorded. I'm just saying in general, some of the experiences in my past has been, hey, executives don't appreciate or understand the importance of cybersecurity. So you have to be that translator, the communicator between the security, the IT, and the executives, and helping them understand that. So thank you.
And just to tack on real quick, because Marcos made an interesting point, and something that kind of struck with me, and something I battle with even to this day, is you go into cybersecurity thinking you know a lot until you realize the actual immense scope of what cybersecurity entails. He mentioned the term of, cybersecurity is sort of an umbrella of covering a lot of things. So you'll go into the industry and it's going to be very overwhelming. And so for me, that was surprising because I realized I don't actually know as much as I thought I knew. And I'm constantly still to this day, 5 years in, and I'm sure everybody on the panel can agree, you are still learning every day because new attacks come out, new technology comes out, new ways of conveying information, handling information, infrastructure. That there's always something new to the industry. And that's what makes it exciting. But that also means you have to constantly be learning. That also means you're probably not going to always know. Actually, I can guarantee you, you're not going to know everything. You probably never will, no matter how hard you try, because there's just not enough time in the day to read every book out there. You can certainly try. I'd love somebody to prove me wrong, but I haven't met anybody yet who could. So I would say, yeah, the other surprise for me was how much knowledge is out there. But that's where that kind of team aspect comes in, of you have those guys who know something really well, and you can kind of, sort of like a recipe, you have each ingredient plays a part in making, this fantastic cake, but the butter guy can't play the same role as the sugar guy, kind of thing. So
I'm a foodie, so I love your analogy of butter and sugar. Been watching a lot of Baking Championship Halloween edition lately. I have a question. The last year and a half has been pretty interesting, right? So we're kind of curious, how has COVID-19 impacted your field? And do you have maybe a lesson learned that you can share?
Yeah, I'll start this one off. COVID-19 has impacted all of us in various ways, right? Specifically, how we interact with our teams and keep them engaged in a virtual or remote environment is really what was the big shock for most organizations, I'd say. And I went across 2 organizations, and it's funny that Alexis mentioned how small the cybersecurity community is. I worked with her just as recently as 6 weeks ago, and I didn't even know she was going to be on this panel at Valley Metro. So we worked together, but we have dealt with it there at TB Consulting. We also are still dealing with some of those challenges, right? And so even with your collaboration tools such as like Zoom and WebEx and Teams, you're still missing that that personal aspect that we're used to, right? Where you're able to build rapport and build that trust amongst and friendships amongst the team members, or between manager and teams, or teams and your customers, right? And so one of the lessons learned that I could share is being hyper vigilant in like when you do have the interactions, right? Because if your only interaction is 3 Zoom meetings for 30 minutes each day, it's going to feel very robotic, right? It's not going to have that human feel to it. And so one thing that I had to learn was, I don't have the normal social cues to pick up on when it comes to, employee issues or things that are challenges, or they're slower to get to me. And so I have to ask those probing questions, or I have to engage more in the, in the group and team chats, right? Or have a little bit of a longer daily stand up to make sure that we're talking and we're building that rapport. So that's probably the main challenge that we've seen with COVID-19.
I think the main challenge I think we had with COVID-19 was just we were prepared for, you know, a workforce that could work from home, but not working for an extended period. So when that happened, you know, we had to make sure, all right, do you have your VPN account? Can you access the resources you need to access from home? Because you're primarily working from home, you can't go into the office. So in order to access stuff that's in the data center, you're gonna have to have, you know, use a VPN client on your computer. So I think that was one of the challenges. It wasn't a deal breaker. It wasn't monumental to the point that we lost our ability to function. It was just like, okay, everybody bring your laptops in at this time. We're gonna put VPN clients on them. We're gonna make sure that, you know, while we do that, we're gonna make sure that everybody's computers are checking in with, you know, endpoint protection, and also, you know, okay, we want to make sure that we have an MDM, you know, mobile device manager, in case people are working from home, they lose their computer or their computer gets compromised. All right, I want to be able to wipe that computer immediately as soon as I have a user report that. So just all these things that you take for granted because people are working within the office, now you have to think about, because wait a second, they're not jumping on a secure internet connection. They are on their own computer, you know, internet connection at home. And while they're there, I want to be able to have visibility on what's happening. So, all right, I want to make sure that I have endpoint protection deployed so that if something nefarious happens on that person's computer, I'm going to get an alert whether they are on our network or not. But yeah, so I think that, and then of course, obviously the business continuity plan, you know, you want to, as a security person, at least for me, I have to deal with disaster recovery. So like, okay, I want to make sure that we do our disaster recovery more often, whether it's a tabletop where it's situation and we're saying, what do we do if we're in a pandemic and we lose 100 staff? All right, manager, you're the manager of the systems. What would you do? All right, do you have your steps in place? So revisiting these conversations and putting them in front of us and saying, okay, next time something like this happens, guess what? We're going to be prepared. If I lose somebody to COVID-19, that's critical to the organization. I don't want to be dead in the water. I want to be able to function just as I was before. So cross-training across the organization. Hey, I'm the manager, but I have a backup, and my backup has a backup. So you're having to plan all these things. So I think COVID-19 was a bad and good thing, but it brought to light a lot of things that we take for granted in IT, and kind of made you appreciate and made you plan in advance for future incidents.
Thank you. There you go.
I don't really have much to add. Everything that has been said, I think, has been said very well. The only thing I'll add is one other use case scenario, one other frustration or pain point we've had is just people trying to print. We have these Xerox machines and we're so used to doing things, and our processes are in-office processes. And then what do you do when you've got data and your data owners trying to get your data owners to make a decision on these changes? And as a cybersecurity professional, I always tell my team, you don't want to make anything up. You don't want to assume what your data owners are going to be willing to decide. So let's just hang tight. So we did a lot of hanging tight, waiting for our data owners to make a decision on how we perform business. That's all.
Thank
And
you.
I think to kind of tack on, I think everybody's covered most of the bases. For me, it was communication was a big one. You know, when you take away that face-to-face factor, it becomes harder to maintain communication, maintain being able to stay connected with your team. I think the second one is having a healthy work-life balance, because as we start to work from home, it starts to be a lot easier to fall into, well, let me just do this now, and then, oh, I have a project or presentation, let me work on that late tonight. And it kind of becomes this flow of, I need to make sure that I still, you know, have dinner with my family and still make time for that. I'm not just working throughout the entire day and night, because now it's not a matter of, driving to work, driving home. It's now a matter of, well, work is at home. So it kind of takes away that boundary a little bit. So setting those boundaries in place. And of course, too, there are the other side of things of making sure that you stay motivated and you stay not distracted, for lack of better words, but to stay not distracted when you're working, because it's very easy, especially if you have like a family at home during the pandemic, having like kids running around or something like that, and then you're in a meeting or you're working on like a critical piece of information, you have to turn and you have to make, address that, and you kind of lose focus. So maintaining your focus is, I think, another big one, sort of a lesson learned of creating that mindset and space of work is work and then playtime is playtime, making sure to have a healthy balance of the two.
Awesome. Okay, we got some questions coming in. So our question is from CNT 205 class. Welcome, CNT class and students. What are the biggest cyber threats on the horizon, and are you preparing for them?
Wow, that's a wide-ranging question, right? The biggest cybersecurity threats, and this is going to sound, super vague, but it's the things that we don't know about, right? We don't often know, where the hackers are going or where they're going to attack next, right? I mean, the case in point, when they went after the supply chain with, SolarWinds, and nobody was prepared for it. So if you don't know to block that, then you have to throw out this wide kind of dragnet of like security and hope that you have, the defense in depth, and that you're doing this holistic approach with backups, and that if you do get breached, and you probably will eventually get breached, that it's contained within a small area and you don't have second and third order effects that affect third parties and that sort of thing. I mean, one of the things that we were briefed in the Guard that was emerging was like certain companies do bug bounties. Well, now hackers are offering internal employees money to receive, a ransomware link and just click on it, right? And then they have this deniability. You can't trace the money, because it's coming in Bitcoin or something, or that they accepted this deal that, they're going to skip right past all of your cybersecurity threats, right? And so then you have to worry about the internal threat, security and education and training. So yeah, I mean, I think we are preparing for them. I think everybody here, and they teach it well, within all of the certifications and all of the training that I've been to, is like the defense in depth and holistic approach, right? To make sure that you're covering all of your bases, so that if you do get, a breach, that it's as narrow as possible, and you can, contain it, eradicate it, and get back to business as quickly as possible. But I don't have a specific one. It's kind of the unknown.
Yeah, I would agree with Marcos there. But I think, again, it's hard to say because there is that level of unknown. But what I would like to think is that one of the biggest threat factors is actually the people within the organization. If you think about it, if you didn't have Jane Doe clicking on that weird email and clicking the link, then you'd be taking away that entire risk factor to the organization. So I think the biggest threat is the users themselves within the organization. And there are certainly a lot of ways to remediate that and prepare for it. And a lot of that comes into cybersecurity awareness within an organization, and continually training your employees, and continually training even your parents, friends, family that aren't as aware, just kind of reminding them and letting them know, like, that thought in the back of their head of, don't click those things, don't do these things. Because I know I've had my parents call me, and my parents are in their 60s, and they call me, they're like, I got a weird text message and it's telling me that I need to go on Amazon. No, you don't need to go on Amazon, you're fine, I promise. Just delete the message. And it's funny, but in reality, there's a lot of people who don't have kids, or don't have kids that they can call to be able to do that, or so on and so forth. Or maybe just don't lack the mindset to think to do that. So I think in reality, the biggest threat is people themselves. They are their own risk factor. So again, preparing for them is just education, and being proactive at that as well. So I can't, unfortunately, I can't predict the future and say, oh, it's this software and this type of attack, because it's hard. The unknown is there. So
I wish I could say the biggest threat is something like phishing or ransomware or something, because then you can get a think tank on that and start solving a problem, right? But the biggest problem I see today is the same thing that I was introduced to 20 years ago when I started in this field. And it got brought up 10 years ago when we were talking about 13 nations joining to buy into this F-35 program. And what are you going to do? And how are you going to secure all these different datas? And you have different regulation. You have Australia has one set, Turkey has another set. So we are global. We're a global nation. We're globalized. And the reoccurring theme that I have, and the hardest thing that I have had to deal with, is who owns the data? Who owns the systems? Because sometimes those are not the same people. And what are your governing requirements? Because it's like securing water when you don't know that. And that is something that I don't think we completely have worked out. We don't really have strong privacy laws in our country. And who owns your data? That's something for you guys to think about. When you have a social media or when you're signing up for something, all of this, the stuff I protect at the Department of Revenue is really your data. But where is it? Is it being sold? How are we protecting it? And the data ownership is something that has been troubling since I've been in this industry for 20 years. And I think that until that gets worked out, we're still going to be struggling as a community.
I think everyone covered everything pretty sufficiently. So, like everybody, it's basically your insider users. So you have your inside threats coming from people who work for you, who have different access levels. Obviously, so you want to keep those trained, and then obviously your servers that are facing the outside. Really, the way hackers can get into your system, those are the two primary ways: is phishing. Somebody gets an email and they get infected because they clicked on the wrong thing. Your outside facing servers, which means they're public facing. So say, for instance, you have a server that you host your application on, and that server is accessible to the outside. So that's the only way that's the primary way. I'm not going to say the only way, but the primary ways that they're going to get into your organization is through phishing, email, sending stuff to your users, hoping that somebody clicks on the wrong thing. And then secondly, your public facing. So if I have a firewall that's facing the outside, somebody from China can try to get to it. People have geolocation to minimize that, but at the end of the day, they're publicly facing. So somebody would try to crack that. So keeping your patches, keeping your systems up to date, and keeping your end users well trained so that they do not do the wrong thing.
Awesome, thank you. That was some good stuff. I got a little deep in that, I felt like, in some places. Okay, let's see here. We have another question. Of course, what a great question to ask experts in cyber, right? What bit of advice can you give to non-computer savvy people to protect themselves? Don't make your password, wrap your cell phone in foil. So I guess, what piece of advice would you give non-computer savvy people? Would you give, to non-computer savvy people to protect themselves online?
I think there's a couple of ways to go about this. The first one that I immediately think of is Google's your friend. If there's ever something you're not sure of, if there's a weird website, or like you're getting ready to buy something from a website you've never bought from before, and you're like, I want to make sure my credit card information is safe, Google the reputation of the website. Google a weird link you're getting. Ask questions. Never be afraid to ask questions. I guarantee you will. No, there is no question that is dumb, and the only time it is ones that aren't asked. For me, outside of Google and asking questions, I guess the best way to kind of keep yourself safe, make sure you use those extended passwords, unique characters, things like that. Make sure the passwords are obviously different for different platforms. it's hard to say because the world of the internet is so vast. Try to keep your information as private as you can. You'd be surprised and shocked and probably a little scary how easily people can find information on you just by looking at your Facebook page, and how they can take that trail and find other information. And then they can use that to fish and learn more about you. So kind of being aware of those situations. I think those will probably be the big steps forward in keeping yourself secure.
I would say use MFA, multi-factor authentication, for whatever portals where you're keeping your PII, PHI, any important data, because that makes it harder for them to break into, and then obviously keeping your systems up to date, because the vulnerabilities that are available out there that make you basically susceptible to getting attacked.
Yeah, I love this idea of Googling, right? I think the biggest thing you can do for yourself is to educate yourself, right? If you want to know, something, you have to educate yourself about it. And, you want to have good credit, you have to educate yourself about how to use credit. You want to be good at a sport, right? You have to educate yourself about how to play the mechanics and then train for it, right? And so, yeah, all the passwords, the multi-factor authentication, like if you just look on any of the any of the antivirus sites or any of the cybersecurity sites or anything, that if you just search like top 10 things I can do for cybersecurity, there's going to be 500 lists out there, and they all kind of say the same thing. So you just go out to there and you look at them, right? Privacy settings, multi-factor authentication, don't use the same password. All of those are on there, and if you just take a moment to look at it, it's the reason that our biggest the insider threat is like the biggest impactful to us, is because of the lack of education on that aspect. So educating yourself is through Googling or reading and taking a class or a webinar like this is excellent.
I completely agree with everybody, but Marcus, you nailed it. I just recommend go through the top 10, do the best practices, but then to add to something Alexis said, educate yourself on who owns your data. And I'll keep coming back to that repeatedly, probably, because you'll be surprised. You think you own your data, but you really don't. And it's a lot of data. It's not just your home address and how many houses you've owned, but you would be so surprised at how easily your personal information is. It's so easy to get.
Awesome. Great tidbits. Another question. So technology changes so quickly. How do you stay current in your field? I remember Marcos and Alexis, you might have mentioned like the constant learning, right? So what are some things that you do to help stay current within your field?
So it's kind of a two-part answer. Again, we talked a lot about educating yourself online. For me, part of it too is I'll read at least one security article a day, even if it's just a 2 to 3 minute read, just to stay up to date with what's kind of going on in the world. And staying up to date in security news certainly helps, because then I can also sort of shift gears on where my focus needs to be when I'm maybe learning more about the industry, learning more about a particular attack. I think the second one too is stuff like this, these kind of panels where you meet other individuals. You can gain their knowledge and skill set by talking with them and kind of learning, okay, what are you working on? And you learn like, oh, that's really interesting. I never thought about that before. And for you, it kind of triggers something where you can then go and research it. So again, in the industry of cybersecurity and even IT, you are going to constantly be learning. And so staying up to date or staying current is also kind of falling with the trends of what the organizations will need as well. And just doing research. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a lot of Googling. It is, you will become a very proficient at using Google and using your key terms to find what you need to find.
I agree. I'm an avid reader myself, and I'm very open to learning. So I also teach. So I teach cybersecurity courses at GCU. I write about privacy rights, but most of my learning comes from reading and learning from the people I work with. I'll sit down with a DBA, show me what the new codes are, or I'll sit down with our firewall administrator, show me what's new in Palo Alto, walk me through this. I'm constantly learning from people, and it's also how I build partnerships to get my job done.
Yeah, for sure. Working in the field it's going to be a requirement. If you work in the field, you have to, you're going to run across these new situations, and you're going to have to research them and stay up to date. To a point, the certifications require you to continually learn. You have your continuing education credits and things that you have to go to. There's the webinars and all of those things. But just being in the field, like there's no replacement for that. Because you're forced into it, right? You see an alert that you've never seen, you hear of an attack vector that you've never thought of securing, and you have to dig down and really get to the crux of those things to understand how to secure against it. So, the exposure, being in the field, taking on those internships, working on the help desk or, a Geek Squad or something to be around it is going to keep you current.
Yeah, I think everybody kind of covered everything. Just being read up, being part of LinkedIn groups that talk about cybersecurity, big part of Facebook groups that talk about cybersecurity, Reddit. There's so much information out there. I take a Python class, not because I need it, but because in order for me to talk intelligently with my developers, I gotta know something about these programs. So React.js, Ruby's on Rails, Go, all these programming languages that are coming up. Then obviously you have the cloud, AWS. Everybody's jumping on AWS. You have to keep up with that. There's a lot of resources out there. The CIS benchmarks. If you Google that, it gives you the security standards that are followed by the elite security engineers. So you have a lot of information. Qualys, obviously, Nessus, all these companies whose main product is providing cybersecurity. So they have so much information. Keeping up with the CVEs, which are just your vulnerabilities as they come out. Okay, which is the most severe? NIST is a government organization. Just Google NIST, it will tell you everything you need to know on what the government standards are. And so, yeah, just being well read up. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it is 6:57 and time flies when you're having fun, right? Like I knew it was going to zoom by and sure enough it did. So last question, maybe like in 30 seconds or less, what piece of advice would you leave for students that are interested in going into this field?
I would say network with other individuals. That's going to be a great way for you to not only learn, but to get a good job. Ask questions and look for internships. And if you're not sure what qualifications you need for the internship, go on LinkedIn, take a look at that. If there's a job that interests you, look at those qualifications and start to cater your education toward those qualifications.
Yeah, I would say make sure it's right for you, because as we bring in new hires or folks that are new or interns, right? Because TB Consulting, we've done several things with the community colleges as well, and they come in and they try really hard because they think cybersecurity, because it's an emerging field and you can earn so much money based off of salary.com, that maybe that's something you should go into, right? And if it's not right for you, it usually doesn't usually not useful, and folks don't succeed. And so do your homework, make sure if you can get an internship, you get a feel for it, or get into technology, or tinker at home, build a lab, go through some of the online training or whatever, to make sure that it's right for you. Then you're going to be well placed when you're in that scenario where you have to perform, because unfortunately for cybersecurity, failure at our job means that there's possibly a breach. And in large organizations, or in organizations that deal with customers that have PII, like personal identifiable information or health information, you could possibly impact their lives by having their, credit card numbers out there and identity theft and that sort of thing. So there's high stakes there as well.
I say get a mentor, come into the field open and ready to believe and understand that you don't know everything and you never will. Be familiar with NIST 853 and be familiar with your CIS benchmarks.
Yeah, I'm just going to underscore what Stacy just said about finding a mentor. Finding a mentor is like taking a shortcut in life because it helps you avoid all the things that you would have gone through by trial and error. So find a mentor, somebody that's done what you're trying to achieve, and say, hey, how did you get here? I'm going to take you out to lunch. I'm going to pay for your lunch, but I need to know how you got here. Be persistent, because at the end of the day, these guys are professionals. They've got families, but if you show that you're interested in the field, they'll certainly make the time. So find a mentor, and then and like Marco said, set up a lab at your house on your laptop. Most of the laptops nowadays come with like 16 gigs, which we didn't have back then, and like 1 terabyte. So just build a lab. Everything is freeware, VMware Workstation, Kali Linux. It's a great product if you're trying to get into penetration. So download those tools, test them out in your lab environment, see if it's something you like. Like I earlier alluded, I started off as a computer science major, and then halfway I was sitting in front of a computer 4 hours trying to decode a program, a Java program. And then quickly I realized this is not what I wanted. So the quicker you reach that point where you know what you want for sure, that's going to make you accelerate your career and your goals.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and spending your evening with us. I know it's hard after a long day's work to stay late. So we appreciate you. Thank you for all our attendees. I hope that attending the panel was helpful. If you are here for extra credit, I did drop the link to the survey that you can complete. And our panelists, once again, thank you so much. Your insight was so invaluable. We so much appreciate you spending your evening with us. So with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off. So thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.